Today we stand at the crossroads of history once again. What we are witnessing is not just another regional conflict. It is the unraveling of a world order that once pretended to be stable. As Russia advances on the global chessboard, Israel, a nation long shielded by Western power, finds itself drawn into the vortex of a new kind of battlefield, political, economic, and ideological. Let me ask you this: when the empire shifts its weight, what happens to those standing in its shadow? That, my friends, is exactly the question Israel must answer today. Russia's global rise has become one of the most defining and unsettling developments in modern geopolitics. As the dust of the Cold War era fades into history, Moscow's reemergence as a strategic powerhouse is reshaping the balance of global influence in ways few Western analysts anticipated. For years, the world was told that the unipolar order led by Washington was permanent, unchallengeable, and absolute. Yet today, we are witnessing something profoundly different. Russia is not merely asserting its military power, it is redrawing the geopolitical map, shifting the axis of decision-making from the West to a new and unpredictable center. What makes this moment so compelling is not simply the resurgence of Russia itself, but the method of its rise. Unlike the superpower rivalries of the past, Russia's strategy operates on multiple fronts: economic, military, and ideological. It doesn't seek to dominate through direct conquest. It seeks to build influence through endurance, alliances, and leverage. Energy has become its most effective weapon. Pipelines, gas routes, and oil corridors now function as tools of persuasion and pressure. Europe, once comfortably dependent on Russian gas, now faces an energy insecurity that exposes the fragility of Western economic planning. This is not just geopolitics, it is economic warfare executed with precision and patience. But the more fascinating element, and one that should alarm the Western bloc, is how Russia's assertiveness has given voice to a growing coalition of nations that no longer wish to be dictated to by Washington or Brussels. From Asia to Africa, from Latin America to the Middle East, countries are recalibrating their foreign policies around the realization that the United States is no longer the sole arbiter of global destiny. Russia's message is clear: there is another way to power, another way to resist, another way to survive. In this unfolding drama, the West's monopoly on moral and political authority is being challenged openly. The sanctions intended to cripple Russia have instead strengthened its alliances, forcing nations to rethink their dependency on Western currency systems and military guarantees. Every failed attempt to isolate Moscow has, paradoxically, amplified its voice. And as Russia advances, not with ideological slogans, but with pragmatic partnerships, the global order begins to fracture along new, unpredictable lines. So the real question confronting the world is no longer whether Russia can sustain this momentum. It's whether the West can adapt to a world where it no longer holds all the cards. The empire is trembling, and the echo of that tremor is being felt from Washington to Tel Aviv. The game has changed, and Russia is no longer playing by the old rules. Israel's growing strategic isolation has become one of the most striking indicators of the shifting global balance of power. For decades, Israel positioned itself as the West's strongest outpost in the Middle East, a fortress of Western influence protected by American military aid, European diplomacy, and global media sympathy. But as new alliances take shape and the geopolitical winds turn eastward, that shield is beginning to crack. The very foundation of Israel's security, its reliance on Western dominance, is being tested as Russia, China, and regional powers redefine what influence means in the 21st century. What makes this moment extraordinary is not that Israel faces external threats, it always has. The change lies in the weakening of the protective network that once guaranteed its supremacy. Washington's grip on the Middle East is loosening. Russia's expanding footprint through its partnership with Iran coordination with Syria, and diplomatic outreach to Arab nations has redrawn the regional map. Even countries once hesitant to criticize Israel are now emboldened, calculating that the age of unilateral American power is fading. The more Russia advances, the more Israel's strategic environment becomes unpredictable and crowded. The shift is also visible in subtle but powerful ways, in trade deals that bypass the dollar, in regional dialogues that exclude Western mediators, and in the rise of BRICS as an alternative platform for economic and political collaboration. Israel, once at the center of Western-backed diplomacy, now watches as new blocs form without it. Its traditional leverage, technological innovation, intelligence sharing, and military strength remains significant, but it no longer guarantees unquestioned dominance. The battlefield has changed from physical confrontation to geopolitical positioning, and in this arena, Israel's options are narrowing. Perhaps the most revealing sign of Israel's growing isolation is its struggle to navigate between conflicting powers. It cannot afford to alienate the United States, yet it cannot ignore the growing influence of Russia and China in the very region it inhabits. Every decision now carries a cost. Support for Western sanctions risks losing coordination with Moscow and Syria. Aligning too closely with Washington undermines its trade interests with Asia. The tightrope is thinning, and the fall could be steep. The hook in all this, the uncomfortable truth, is that Israel's strength was never purely military, it was structural. It depended on an order that is now collapsing. As the global system fractures into multiple poles of power, Israel finds itself not as the chess master, but as one of the pieces being moved. Its isolation is not just diplomatic, it is existential, signaling that the era of unchallenged Western dominance in the Middle East is truly coming to an end. Israel's deepening isolation stands as one of the clearest signs that the balance of global power is shifting. For decades, it operated as the West's anchor in the Middle East, protected by U.S. military support, European markets, and an aura of political impunity. That arrangement depended on a stable, Western-led order. Now, as that order fragments, the guarantees that once made Israel untouchable are eroding. The very network of alliances that once insulated it from pressure has thinned, leaving it to navigate a region that is no longer dominated by Washington or London, but contested by Moscow, Beijing, and a host of regional players pursuing their own interests. The change has come not through open defeat, but through quiet realignment. Russia's cooperation with Iran, its coordination with Syria, and its careful diplomacy with Saudi Arabia and Egypt have created new channels of influence that bypass Tel Aviv. China's economic reach through the Belt and Road Initiative adds another layer of complexity. Every new deal, every pipeline, every regional summit that excludes Western mediators chips away at Israel's privileged status. Countries that once avoided direct criticism now calculate that the cost of challenging Israel has fallen, while the benefits of aligning with the emerging Eurasian bloc have grown. Inside this shifting landscape, Israel faces impossible choices. It cannot fully detach from the United States, yet its dependence on Western support increasingly comes with diplomatic isolation in the global South. Its military operations in Gaza or Syria now carry greater political risk because they unfold under the scrutiny of a world less sympathetic to Western narratives. The hooks of this story are sharp. Each move Israel makes to secure itself deepens the perception that it is fighting yesterday's battles in a new geopolitical game. What gives this crisis its urgency is that Israel's power was always structural, rooted in the stability of a unipolar system. That system is cracking. The rise of BRICS, the diversification of energy markets, and the steady decline of Western economic leverage have exposed how much of Israel's security depended on a world that no longer exists. The state that once acted as the spearhead of Western influence now finds itself surrounded by shifting loyalties, uncertain partners, and a public opinion landscape turning decisively against endless militarism. The fortress has not yet fallen, but the walls are no longer impenetrable. The Middle East has once again become the epicenter of global power struggles, but this time the battlefield extends far beyond borders and weapons. The region that once symbolized endless wars and proxy conflicts is now the stage for a far more sophisticated contest. A war of influence, energy, and economics. Every decision, every alliance, every confrontation in the Middle East now reverberates across continents, shaping the future of international relations. What makes this moment extraordinary is that the players have changed, and so have the rules. The United States no longer commands unquestioned loyalty, and Russia, China, and regional powers are stepping forward to redefine what dominance means in a multipolar world. The real battle is not fought with tanks or airstrikes. It's being fought in boardrooms, oil ministries, and international summits. The Middle East has become the testing ground for a new kind of diplomacy, one that fuses military strategy with economic negotiation. Russia's deepening presence in Syria, Iran's expanding influence through strategic partnerships, and China's growing investment in Gulf infrastructure all demonstrate that the region is no longer controlled by Western fiat. The hook in this geopolitical shift lies in its subtlety. The empires of today conquer not by invasion, but by integration. They build pipelines instead of bases, trade agreements instead of colonies, and influence through technology and finance rather than fear. For decades, Washington treated the Middle East as both a resource depot and a military laboratory. That approach has reached its limits. The Arab world, fatigued by decades of intervention and broken promises, is recalibrating. Nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are balancing between East and West, playing a careful game of neutrality to secure their own futures. Meanwhile, smaller nations once ignored on the diplomatic map are finding new leverage as energy markets shift and alternative trade networks emerge. The center of gravity is moving, and this time it's moving away from the traditional powers that built their dominance on the region's instability. This transformation carries profound implications for global politics. The Middle East is no longer a pawn, it is becoming a player. It is not simply reacting to the world's changes, it is driving them. The world's major powers are discovering that influence in the region can no longer be bought with arms or aid. It must be earned through respect, partnership, and economic fairness. The old playbook of control is collapsing, and what replaces it will define the balance of power for generations to come. The Middle East, once the world's most volatile region, is now its most strategic. Not just a battlefield of bombs, but a battlefield of ideas, economics, and the future of sovereignty itself. Modern warfare is no longer confined to the battlefield. It now extends into the boardrooms of corporations, the corridors of financial power, and the fragile arteries of global trade. The missiles of the 21st century are not just launched from silos, they are fired through sanctions, currency manipulation, and economic blockades. This new form of conflict has exposed a deep truth that few dare to acknowledge. The world's political instability is inseparable from the crisis of capitalism itself. The systems that promise prosperity and progress are now generating inequality, debt, and endless confrontation. As Professor Richard Wolff often emphasizes, wars today are as much about markets and money as they are about missiles and maps. The Russia-Ukraine conflict, the chaos in Gaza, and the rising tensions across Asia have all demonstrated that economic warfare has replaced traditional conquest. When nations fail to dominate militarily, they turn to financial coercion, freezing assets, cutting off trade, or weaponizing energy. But these very tools are now backfiring on those who wield them. Sanctions against Russia, meant to isolate it, have instead accelerated the de-dollarization of global trade. Countries once dependent on Western financial systems are now seeking alternatives through BRICS, local currencies, and new energy partnerships. The world's economic chessboard is being rewritten, and the West is losing its monopoly over the rules. This shift has revealed something far more dangerous than geopolitical rivalry. It has exposed the fragility of capitalism's global structure. The same economic system that built unprecedented wealth in the 20th century is now devouring itself through inequality and overreach. Ordinary citizens pay the price for the ambitions of financial empires through inflation, unemployment, and social instability. The irony is brutal. While the media sells war as patriotism, the real profits flow to defense contractors, energy magnates, and financial speculators. The battlefield may change, but the beneficiaries remain the same. Here lies the most gripping hook of all, the realization that economic power, once the silent engine of stability, has become the very weapon destabilizing the world. As nations use sanctions as swords and trade as shields, global capitalism reveals its own contradictions. It cannot survive peace because it thrives on conflict. Every crisis becomes an opportunity for profit, every collapse a chance for consolidation. The result is a permanent state of economic warfare, where victory is measured not in territory gained, but in markets controlled. This is not a failure of policy, it is the design of the system itself. Western hegemony, once considered the unshakable foundation of the global order, is now facing its most serious challenge since the end of the Second World War. For decades, Washington and its allies dictated the rules, setting trade norms, defining democracy, and punishing defiance with sanctions or military intervention. But that age of unilateral dominance is fading fast. What we are witnessing today is a global rebellion against the Western monopoly on power, a quiet but decisive uprising of nations determined to reclaim sovereignty over their economies, politics, and destinies. The empire is not collapsing overnight, but its cracks are widening, and through those cracks, a new world is emerging. The formation and expansion of alliances like BRICS, the rise of independent financial systems, and the diversification of energy routes all signal a powerful message. The rest of the world no longer wishes to live under the shadow of Western dictates. Russia and China have become the architects of this resistance, not because of ideology, but because they offer an alternative, a multipolar vision of power where influence is negotiated, not imposed. This shift has forced the West into a defensive posture it has not experienced in generations. Every move it makes to tighten control only accelerates the creation of new partnerships that bypass its reach. The most compelling hook in this transformation is the silent withdrawal of obedience. Nations once dependent on Western approval in Asia, Africa, and Latin America are rewriting their foreign policies, building regional economies, and quests, ironing the morality of Western-led wars and sanctions. The illusion of moral superiority that once underpinned Western leadership is evaporating. People across the globe are asking, how can the same powers that preach human rights continue to profit from endless conflict and exploitation? That question has no satisfying answer, and it is eroding the West's credibility faster than any military defeat could. As the global system realigns, Israel's position serves as a vivid reflection of this decline. Once shielded by the full weight of Western influence, it now stands as a symbol of the West's diminishing authority, forced to navigate a world that no longer bends to its benefactors. The U.S. can no longer command automatic loyalty. Its threats carry less fear, its promises less reward. This unraveling of Western dominance is not just a geopolitical shift, it's an ideological reckoning. The very narrative of global leadership built on superiority and control is collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. The West is discovering that empires don't always fall by defeat. Sometimes they fall by disbelief. The call for a new vision of peace and sovereignty has never been more urgent or more complex. The world stands at a crossroads where old alliances are fracturing and the illusions of endless Western dominance are fading into history. What comes next cannot be another fragile truce or another political agreement signed under the pressure of power. It must be a redefinition of peace itself, not as the absence of war, but as the presence of justice, equality, and genuine national independence. The global conflicts unfolding today, from Eastern Europe to the Middle East, are not isolated events. They are symptoms of a deeper imbalance rooted in economic exploitation and political arrogance. To heal, the world must confront not just the violence of weapons, but the violence of systems that breed inequality and dependence. Professor Richard Wolff's message in this context is strikingly clear. Peace cannot survive in a world still governed by economic greed and imperial ambition. The structures of global capitalism have turned nations into competitors rather than collaborators, forcing governments to pursue profit over people. This system rewards militarization because it feeds the industries that sustain it. Every bomb dropped becomes a transaction, every sanction imposed a business strategy. True sovereignty, therefore, cannot exist within this framework. It requires liberation from the very economic forces that keep nations subservient to stronger powers. The pursuit of peace, then, is inseparable from the pursuit of economic justice. The most powerful hook in this transformation lies in what ordinary people are beginning to recognize. The cost of empire is being paid by those who gain the least from it. Citizens across continents are losing faith in leaders who promise stability while fueling chaos abroad. Movements for independence, self-determination, and fair trade are no longer ideological relics. They are the foundation of a new geopolitical reality. Nations are demanding not just a seat at the table, but the right to decide what kind of table it will be. This growing awareness marks the beginning of a historic shift. Peace will no longer be dictated by empires, but shaped by the collective will of nations refusing to be pawns. The struggle for sovereignty is not only political, it is moral and economic. The world is waking up to a profound truth. Security without justice is illusion, and diplomacy without equality is deception. A new era is dawning, one that demands courage to dismantle the systems that make peace impossible and the vision to build a world where freedom is not negotiated but lived. So I say this to you, this is not just a moment to watch history, it's a moment to understand it. Russia's advance is not the beginning of a new war, it is the continuation of an old struggle between empire, ease and independence, between exploitation and equality, between dominance and dignity. Israel's transformation into a battlefield is a warning to all nations. When power shifts, the old alliances crumble, and those who relied on empire must face the consequences. Let us remember, real peace cannot be built on the foundation of hegemony. It requires balance, justice, and respect for sovereignty. And as this new world order unfolds, the question is not whether Israel can survive as a military state, but whether any nation can survive without confronting the economic contradictions that fuel these endless conflicts. Thank you.